Hi everyone, my name is Joseph and welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 4, Part 9, Sons of Chaos Seekers. Now before I actually start talking about the quotes, a couple of quick announcements. So one may have noticed that Digimon Seekers is officially done, asterisk. I say asterisk because while it is true that Digimon Seekers Parts 9, 10, and 11, and 12 have all released on the Seekers website, it's also been announced via Bandai Namco's official Twitter account that in about 4 weeks, give or take, so the end of February, the first week of March, we'll be getting an epilogue to Digimon Seekers. So that's why I say that while the story, the main part of it, is done, the narration hasn't concluded fully. We still need to have that epilogue. Because of that, I'm going to maintain my same schedule that I've been doing, one Seekers video a week, typically on a Sunday. And I haven't read parts 10, 11, or 12 yet, so I won't be going beyond that. If you guys have, though, please feel free to talk about it in the comments. I just want to keep this spoiler free, I guess, for those who are reading it in order. With that being said, though, I'm not sure why Bandai decided to release the story completely when they had an epilogue that won't be releasing for another 4 weeks. So go figure about that. Anywho, let's go ahead and jump into the quotes that I picked out. You're lying. It was both the rejection of the premise and what Kosuke desperately wanted to be true. The bones of the story that had kept him going are cracking. Such a predictable reaction. Ah well, at least it was a useful lie, seeing as it kept you going this long, the professor said, a self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. He relished grinding Kosuke into dust from the inside. If his entire plan ended up going to hell, at least you have the pleasure of utterly destroying another man with a few simple words. So I won't lie, the only reason why I picked out this quote is because it really emphasizes the professor's change of character, his change of heart. This part even highlights that the professor was a charismatic individual, and as the reader, as the audience, I definitely did fall for his ploy, his act. I truly did believe that the professor had the best interests of the Digimon, the digital world, in combination with humans and the human world. Obviously, I was incorrect about that. It gets revealed in this part that the professor essentially wants to become a Digimon Emperor, quote unquote. It's not stated that Digimon Emperor per se, but an overseer of the digital world. And this comment, or rather this not comment, but description of how if the professor is going to, if his plan is going to end up ending badly, if he's going to go down, he might as well take out someone with him as well. It's just a little bit sad because we know that it is working. Kosuke is being very much impacted by this sudden news that supposedly Saya is dead. It's even stated right here, what Kosuke desperately wanted to be true. The bones of the story that had kept him going were cracking, so he is starting to crumble, unfortunately. As someone who is a fan of Kosuke, it saddens me that this is occurring. And as someone who used to be a fan of the professor, it's just, I won't lie, I did state this in the other part. His review as the antagonist kind of did catch me off guard. I know typically it is a trope, it is a stereotype. I was really hoping we wouldn't go down that route. But I just felt like there wasn't enough textual evidence throughout the story so far to really identify and state with certainty that, the professor would be the antagonist. I felt like one could only deduce that just, again, because of tropes and stereotypes. They'll have to refer to external properties. Well, this story did it, this anime, this manga, this show, and etc. Right? While I'm not the biggest fan of his change of heart, I think the writers are doing a good job of really demonstrating of how much the professor has changed, of what happens when one's persona has dropped and one is seeing their real selves. Continuing forward, the Black Agumon before you is undoubtedly her partner Digimon. The identification codes match. I've only lied to you about one thing. As I said, believe what you want about whether or not her body is still in that facility, or the typo, are you willing to live with the consequences? It says you willing. But honestly, it's are you willing to live with the consequences? What consequences? Kosuke snarled. You're a genius, but you make mistakes under pressure. That medicine will wake up the consciousness of a DMIA victim inside its partner Digimon's Digicore and restore its self-awareness. Suppose you gave it to the Black Agumon and wake up Saya's consciousness, but it finds it has no body to return to. What becomes of it then? The professor wondered aloud. Kosuke knew exactly where this was headed. He believed her consciousness was still in the Black Agumon. He didn't want to believe she died in the real world, and he hoped against hope for a miracle and knew he was being willfully ignorant of any other outcomes. But he also knew he had to try, regardless of which part of the professor's little speech had been a lie. This is the occult you're dabbling in, Koski. If that's what you want, by all means, administer the medicine. I will stand by and watch with great interest, the professor continued. Koski felt his heart break as a choice overwhelmed him. The syringe clattered to the ground. He felt weak. He couldn't do it. So long as he could cling to the hope that Saya's consciousness was still in there, so long as his only choice was to pray for a miracle rather than be certain, he couldn't administer the shot. But doing so was the only way to know if she wake up. He either save her or seal her fate. It was too much to bear. And then the professor states, I didn't highlight this part, but I think it adds to it. The digital world truly can change lives. The digital world can truly change lives, Professor Rugenji gloated, as if none of this involved him in the least. So, as I stated in the previous quote, as a fan of Koski, it did sadden me to see him breaking. And then we get this passage where, indeed, Koski is crumbling. And not just crumbling, but he's in the act of falling apart. So, like, not just the dust is coming off, pieces are starting to actually break. And it is really unfortunate. And I love how, essentially, the professor is gloating, saying that you're a smart individual. Think about this clearly and thoroughly. And Koski is aware about it. He's aware that he is, as the story states, he's being willfully ignorant. And I think as the audience, you could definitely be on his side about that. I mean, this is his fiance, the love of his life. And unfortunately, what he thought was going to save her, well, was all for naught. It was all just a ploy. And as it turns out, he was never going to be able to save her. And at this point now, he essentially only has two options: saving her, which we know is probably not going to be true because supposedly she is dead, or sealing her fate. In which case, if her body is dead and Koski does awaken Saya's consciousness, well, she's just going to be stuck. She won't have her own body to go to. And that's kind of a very scary thing to think about, I won't lie. Kind of like those legends and some of those Digimon where their sword, when it hits, kills someone, it traps the soul of its victim. I wouldn't want that to occur, especially to myself, especially if there is an afterlife, right? Same concept here. If there is an afterlife, Saya won't be able to experience that because she is stuck and trapped within this other body. And that's a horrible thing to do to someone, to condemn them to that kind of fate. Thus why Koski is falling apart, why it's too much of a burden for him to do. And of course, we have the professor off to the side who's just like, well, I'm interested to see what's going to occur. I'm curious to see what's going to happen, even though it's his own daughter. Right? And again, what I find interesting about their relationship, there being the professor and everyone else, is just how it really seems like the professor did not care about anyone, but there's a little comments and remarks, not just in this part, but in previous parts as well, where it kind of is implied that the professor, he, at the very least, did have respect for the individuals he was working with, but is looking like he's just a egotistical, self-centered, self-serving individual. So I like this passage a lot because the professor's obviously thought about this fully and wholly, while Koski's only had part of the information. Now that he has the full context, he's still not making the correct conclusion. He's still being very much, again, as the story said, willfully ignorant. He's still hopeful for that miracle. And I think that really just heightened the sadness of the situation that's going on here, while also elevating just the jerk nature that is Professor Rugenji. This is the occult you're dabbling in, Koski. If that's what you want, by all means, administer the medicine. I will stand by with great interest. The digital world can truly change lives. Right? It's just that statement that he's saying. He's talking about a dear student, a dear companion of his, companion/friend, and he's talking about his own daughter as well. Yet essentially, he doesn't care. Moving on, an anguished scream ripped through the air. An anguished scream ripped through the air. Doromon bent over backward, their heads snapping violently backward until they collapsed. The light on their interface gradually went out. Koski, what? Forgive me, Doromon. You deserved better, Koski said, and dropped to his knees in front of the Digimon. You had no other choice, did you? We chose the right paths, but they were flawed from the start. I never suspected Rugenji would be our undoing, and here I thought I'd come to understand humans, if only a little. Doromon was shockingly sanguine. How kind of you, Doromon, Professor Rugenji said, full of sincere love and reverence. What a beautiful resolution to our tale. You did all what you could. Are you trying to console us, Professor, or send us into a rage? You can't just praise kids for doing their best these days, not until you see some results, Koski said with a dry laugh. Be that as it may, none of the rest of you knew what Koski was going to do once he decrypted the source domain's data, did you? That's very dangerous territory to be in, which is why I should be the one to take this next step, the professor said, returning to the matter at hand. I plan on saying you did it, you know. I was going to give you all the credit. None of that mattered, so long as I found Saya and had a chance to bring her back, Koski said quietly. And I appreciate your love for my daughter, the professor said flatly. Koski groaned. So just further hammering in that the professor is a, maybe not a one-track individual, but definitely a pay attention to one's own tracks kind of individual. What I mean by that is since I would argue that the professor has multiple things going on at the same time, so he can multitask, but obviously he doesn't care about the other perspectives from the community around him. He just cares about his own perspective. That's the track comment. This just really emphasizes again what I said previously. I don't really completely understand the professor's attitude. He keeps mocking the group, but then at the same time, he also compliments and praises the group or consoles the group, or he tries to. And then I feel so bad. I really feel so bad for Koski, and now I'm feeling bad for Doraemon. I'll be honest with everyone. It seems like whatever process that these prototype Digimon are doing is not comfortable. Right. The reason why an angry scream went through the air is because before this, it stated that the data sector decryption is complete. But I would also argue before this, it's also the digital world can truly save lives. Maybe it's just me being too much of a symbolic individual, but I like to think that Doraemon is screaming both because the data sector decryption is complete, but also because it's emotionally heavy for him to be hearing all of this, because Doraemon obviously had a really different kind of relationship compared to the other linker users and their Digimon. It seemed like, as Ichi points it out in chapter 3, that Doraemon and Koski were equals. They were very much both in charge at the same time. So because of that, with that fact in mind, I would argue that they probably were confiding in one another from time to time as well, and thus really developing a personal relationship, and thus to discover that, well, if you discover that your friend and their goal is not able to be accomplished, I feel like most of us would be, at the very least, sad about that, sad for our friend. And in this instance, Doraemon is audibly showing his sadness. But that might just be me looking too much into it. Again, the angry scream could just be because of the data sector decryption is complete. But either way, I like how even if he is in pain, he's still taking the time to speak with Koski. You had no other choice, did you? We chose the right paths, but they were flawed from the start. I never suspected Ryujinji would be our undoing, and here at that I'll come to understand humans, if only a little. Doraemon was shockingly sanguine. I find that sanguine part interesting. In case one is unaware, that means essentially showing a little bit of happiness. So what might be going on here is just a realization for Doraemon. He's getting this opportunity to learn more about humans, that they're more calculating, manipulative, and self-centered than he believed them to be originally. So it's a small little detail, but I think it adds a lot to Doraemon's character. He always did seem the type to observe and to come up with conclusions based on the context that he has, the information he has available to him. And then I just don't like how the professor is acting all chummy. I feel like Doraemon was talking to Koski, not to the group. And then, of course, you have the professor stepping in and saying, thank you for your love and reverence. What a beautiful resolution to our tale. You all did what you could. So again, maybe he's not showing respect towards the group, but just respect to the fact that he's able to accomplish his goal. He's able to get what he wants from all of this. But one thing that I do find really curious is that it is true what the professor explains, how the group did not know Koski's food plan to begin with. And that is kind of dangerous. I do have to give it to the professor. What if something had gone awry? Then it will be on them, right? It will be their fault, their responsibility, the group's responsibility. A sense of chaos, I suppose, specifically in AG. But yet, despite this, I also like how Koski Stu states that even if it did go positively, if it did go well, he had no intention of taking any of the credit. His goal, his focus has always been Saya, and that's it. Nothing beyond that. No glory, no respect. And despite that, though, the professor's response, I appreciate your love for my daughter, the professor said flatly. Just not even with emotion, right? Just flatly, implying that, well, it's just a detail. It's just a detail at this point for the professor. It's not something to react to. And thus, Koski groaned. It's just a reminder of how much the professor did not care about his own daughter at the end, unfortunately. I told you about the source domain, Koski, but I'm really after is the source Digimon, the professor explained as the decryption continued. What's the source Digimon? EG asked. The model digital life form, born at the same time as our world, the seed from which all other AI life forms digivolve. The sacred chalice of the digital world, if you will. Fascinating, isn't it? My heart races just thinking about it. He grew more excited with each passing minute, thinking about the data he'll get to see in real time. What he went on to describe sounded like the stem cells of the digital world, a Digimon that was nothing in its current form, but capable of becoming anything. Contact with real-world data, however, caused it to give birth to several new kinds of Digimon. The prototype Digimon were among them. The most dangerous of these were seared off in a new system within the digital world, but the source Digimon kept receiving outside data. Though the source Digimon itself had not taken any particular form, it was undoubtedly the engine fueling the endless Digivolutions. So I wanted to read this quote mostly for the world building that it's setting up, and also for the discovery that the professor's main goal was not the source domain. So for Koski, he wanted to access the source domain to locate and save Saya / the Black Agumon. But for the professor, his goal was not the source domain, but specifically the source Digimon. This Digimon that gave life, as it stated, born at the same time as our world. I find that comment really interesting. Does that mean like quite literally from the conception of society, or are they talking about like the Big Bang? Because it's drastically different, right? In terms of time and length. But either way, I do think it's really interesting how this source Digimon is being coupled with the start of our society or Earth as we know it. And that basically implies that this Digimon is quite ancient. And usually when something is ancient, that's going to imply really powerful, which is being powerful, essentially. Excuse me, I was stumbling over my words. But yeah, so I just find this world building really intriguing. I'm excited to see who this source Digimon is going to be. Would it be like Lucille-mon? I'm probably not pronouncing that correct, excuse me, but from Frontier, the angel Digimon that's based off Lucifer. Is it going to be an angel-like Digimon, maybe a monstrous looking Digimon? I'm kind of excited to see what the source Digimon will be, if it will be making an appearance. So essentially I just like this quote because of the world building that it's setting up. Continuing forward, interfering with the source Digimon raised numerous ethical, philosophical, and religious quandaries, and needed to be bound by law, like Honingtik did so many years ago. Interfering with the source Digimon could give one the ability to create Digimon at will. I know, I happen to agree with you even. Nevertheless, Regency hesitated. Yuli knew what he was going to say next. You know how I loathe boredom. Think of it, I'll never be bored again. The scientist's curiosity knew no bounds, but Yuli never imagined he would go so far as to use his daughter's death and betray his own students to satisfy it. If this is who you truly are, Professor, you've lost whatever shred of respect I had for you. Have I ever been the type to care about others' thought of me, Yolene? Maybe the failure of the Toddler's program had changed him after all, or simply unleashed something that was always there, spurred on by the loss of his daughter and Yolene's departure. My ultimate goal is to connect the source Digimon, communicate with it, become one with it. Yes, that's right. I am going to mind link with the source Digimon. He intended to become the human overseer of the digital world. So I know I keep saying this, but I just don't. I guess maybe the professor wants to become the overseer of the digital world in order to protect it and make it evolve along with the human world. Because at the beginning of the story, the professor kept making this big deal about how he wanted to protect, maybe not the Digimon themselves, but just the capabilities of the digital world. I really want to reread the first parts because if that is the case, then him becoming the overseer would make a bit more sense because he wants to use the tools that the digital world has to offer him. But again, just for me, I always thought that he was talking about the digital world as a place. Like, for example, a national park. One actually wants to protect the national park, not for its resources, but for its beauty and for the life that's contained within that national park. In other words, the Digimon and the digital world, I personally thought the professor always respected both those aspects. But it's looking more like, well, I have to read the story and look at the diction, but it's looking like he respected more the capability that the digital world will offer the professor. So if that is the case, I could see why he wants to become the overseer. If that's not the case, though, again, I do wish that the story planted more seeds in order for the audience to pick up, oh, the professor has shady motives, ulterior motives. What I also like about this line is just, as always, Yolene is the one that's the voice of reason. Before I started reading this quote, Yolene says sharply, we had to leave it alone. The source Digimon. It's too much for one person to handle, let alone all of humanity. And that's when the professor states his little quote when I started reading from. I just like that because, again, it really emphasizes how Yolene, she's always keeping not just the group in mind, but beyond the group as well. And you always do want someone like that in your community. But then in addition to that, I do like as well how the story tries to justify the professor's change of behavior. And I do like that just because it did not seem like he was this kind of person from the beginning of the story during the flashbacks. And I do like the... sorry, everyone. Pardon me. Thanks for your patience, though. Let me drink you quick some water. Sorry about that again. Thanks for your patience. I'm not going to lie. I'm recovering from a slight cold that I had during the week. During the week. And the beginning of the weekend. And also, pardon the water bottle. This is from my work meeting that I went to. They had some water bottles there, so... I grabbed one for myself, and so that's why I'm finishing up. Anyways, again, thanks for your patience. I do appreciate that. And pardon me for clearing my throat so much. Anywho, so the past, I do believe, I don't believe that the professor was always like this. I agree with the story, or rather, I agree with the assumption, or rather with the idea that the story is pushing forward, that the professor started changing after the Toddlers program had failed. It's just that he was able to hide it a lot better than Yolene and Koski. He changed eternally, while externally, he maintained his demeanor. E.G. and Logomon learned in time to focus on take things as they came, to believe in their own potential, and never do anything by half measures. They thought, worried, cried, celebrated, and puked with every fiber of their beings. They hit rock bottom and clawed their way back up together. Maybe it was true that they wouldn't have grown as much as they had if the professor had been more hands-on, or if they had more information that gave them a sense of security. That felt like a lie, though. So it was a very smart quote, but I like it so much because, as always, anything that emphasizes the relationship between the human and the Digimon, I always adore so much. So before this, some quick context. The professor is essentially just saying to E.G., if he had knew the full information, would he have gone to the same lengths as developing his relationship with Logomon? Or if the professor wasn't as hands-on or interacting with E.G. and Logomon as much, then they wouldn't have developed the relationship that they currently have. And I love how it ends with, that felt like a lie, though. Essentially saying that even without the professor, had Logomon and E.G. had met, that naturally they would have formed their relationship because they're partners, not because they're forced to be partners, but because they respect one another and their ideologies are kind of aligned, right? So since essentially they know how to work with one another. It's a really cool line. At this point of the story, there is a shift. It feels like the Kiros are losing. They're restrained because of the code that the professor has infected the prototype Digimon with. And everyone's trapped. The Digimon are trapped more specifically. And since they're trapped, the hollow-eyed humans are also trapped with their Digimon as well. All they could really do is just talk, right? And it does feel like the professor is winning. But now we're going to the part of the story where, or at least in this specific part where there's going to be a shift. And I won't lie, I really did enjoy this shift. Even the picture is really cool. So let me just read the quote and then I'll describe the picture. Do you ever just shut up, Ruzhenji? Logomon roared, rising to their feet in defiance of their bonds. We're losing our minds just listening to you rattle on. The first stood on end. Why? Professor Ruzhenji asked, puzzlement screwing up his face. You said something when you were talking about finding our friend, Postmon. That was just a fraction of what the source domain's data sector could do. E.G. was furious. The professor showed no regard for the safety of his DMIA pupil, Leon Alexander. You know how I loathe boredom. The phrase had been rattling around in E.G.'s skull the moment the professor said it. He felt compelled to throw it back at him. Oh, the boredom comment was merely a figure of speech, E.G., the professor demurred. You were watching when we fought Kawachimon and Logomon turned into Hell Logormon. You could have stepped in and stopped it, but you didn't. The course of the Digivolution mattered more than Leon's life. Rather, it was more interesting, academically speaking. Leon was a pawn, a means to an end. The professor raised his eyebrows. Aha! You're mad on Leon's behalf. You two were quite close, weren't you? He's your student, E.G. lashed out. Sorry, E.G., that was a fur or something. E.G. lashed out. He couldn't believe he'd respected the professor. You keep talking without saying anything, Ryuzenji. Have you ever taken a good hard look at yourself? Logomon pressed. Keep barking, you mangy stray. Now, EG, I'm on their side. EG interjected, cutting the professor off. I love this part of the story just because our protagonists are starting to get some agency back. And the reason why they're getting their agency is because they're relying on one another, relying on their relationship that they developed. And not just that, but they're keeping in mind the goal that they want to accomplish to rescue their friend. So the picture is really cool. It just shows the back of Ryuzenji's head as he's looking towards EG, who's standing, holding his hand up. And Logomon is standing on all fours with his toe up, and his eyes are glowing red, as is his prototype on his forehead, and he has his mouth open, and he looks ready for action. Really cool picture. I just really appreciate it. I think they being the writers and the artists did a good job of reflecting this change of shift. Really quickly, I want to read the part before where I started. I do that because sometimes I feel like the quote's long enough, but I want to read the beginning part because I think it will add to the quote as a whole. See, you get it. You know where you stand. So why are you sharing the righteous indignation of these two? They have nothing to do with you. Unless, it is sympathy. Why? Ichi asked, anger rising within him. You know why. Do you ever just shut up, Ryuzenji? Logomon wards. So that's where I'll stop. Again, this really just emphasizes how the professor does not seem to value people as individuals, but more as pawns, things that he could use. So then those comments that he would say, I'm proud of you, I'm impressed with how far you got. Is he saying that towards the individual or more towards what he was able to get out of them? More than likely the latter than the former, unfortunately. Again, I can't help, I was a Professor Ryuzenji fan. I still am. He's going to be the villain. Let's make him a cool villain at the very least. And so far he is a cool villain. The whole, I don't care. I'm just focusing on myself. I'm going to bring you down with me by destroying you emotionally. So far I'm enjoying him as a villain, even if I don't like that he became the villain. And I'm loving this shift where he's trying to understand, Eiji, why do you care so much? You don't even know them. They're not your friends, right? Kosuke and Yolene. And Eiji's just like, you know why. And I think that you know why is in reference to obviously Leon, but also just the fact that when one works as a team, well, one needs to work as a team. You need to keep everyone within the community in mind, not just yourself. You don't feel guilt, Yolene added. He had no guilt, no conscience, no empathy, nor could he see his own shortcomings. He craved stimulus. And by the way, that line that he said about how Logomon, that's very telling for an individual like him. I think it goes in line with him as his attaching itself now. Since he is a curious individual, it would make sense why he wouldn't step in to save Helorgamon, even if he had a specific goal for Helorgamon to become. Excuse me. Oh no, I forgot. But Logomon's ultimate form, the proper one, not Helorgamon. Actually, let me quickly go back to that line. The course of the Digivolution mattered more than Leon's life. Rather, it was more interesting, academically speaking. That line just really, I think, goes in line along with his new change, his new self. Horrible thing to say, but it adds a lot to him as a villain. So, horrible thing to say, but I appreciate it as the reader. Anyways, excuse me. No conscience, no empathy, nor could he see his own shortcomings. He craved stimulus, results for everything. Anything else was a means to an end. That's what draws people to you. You're confident, shameless lies. You're a sociopath. G Squad leader. I wasn't gonna go that far. I was gonna go. Sorry. That's what draws people to you. You're confident, shameless lies. You're a sociopath. G Squad leader. I wasn't gonna go that far. I wasn't gonna go quite that far. Excuse me. Eiji couldn't help but recoil from such a bold armchair diagnosis. The professor stopped what he was doing, unable to concentrate. Point is, we don't believe a word you say anymore. You're lower than a Sokomon and twice as smelly, Logomon said, spoiling for a fight. So you hate me now. Professor Ryuzenji's shoulders slumped. Hearing it from a Digimon hurt worse. You betrayed Leon, old man Tartarus. You betrayed Leon, old man Tartarus, and the Digipolice lady. And as much as you might try to hide it, one day you're going to turn on me and EG too. I just know it. Is that what you think of me, Logomon? It's what I know. Anyone who would use their own daughter's death for their own benefit couldn't be trusted. So, besides the fact that Logomon and EG are starting to regain their agency, I just really appreciate how the voice of reason, Yolene, she again steps in And she point blank tells the professor that he's mental, he's wild, he's crazy, he's a sociopath. And I like that so much. Because I think that in the same way that the professor's new hateful comments goes in line with his new behavior change, his change of behavior, I feel like this comment from Yolene just goes so much in line with her as an individual too. Again, she's always been that kind of individual who seems stoic, but that stoicness is quite important because it allows one to be focused, work as a team, and be a proper leader, but also recognize what is morally correct and what is unethical and what shouldn't be pursued. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, when I first read this, I was like really excited. A little bit upset again at the start. I was like, no, Koski's breaking, Koski is falling. No, the professor is evil. The professor is so malicious. And then I get to EG and Logomon. I'm like, yes, they're coming back. They're pulling themselves back up from the card that they just lost. And then you have Yolene, who, besides this comment, her other comments saying, if this is the person you truly are, I no longer respect you. It just makes me put my fists in the air as a reader. I really enjoy it. I really appreciate it. So moving on to the last line. This was the end of the last quote, excuse me. This was the end of the road. It was time to say goodbye. E.G. felt like he'd been living a dream, but he could see the door was closing on that life. Once E.G. settled on his feelings towards Ryuzenji, he felt a massive amount of energy rolling up within Logomon. Their inextinguishable magic flame burned bright once more. E.G. heard the chains holding Logomon screech and groan. They were in lockstep once again. Well, Leon, you see, he knew too much, Professor Ryuzenji said, looking at the postmark where Leon's consciousness ostensibly lay dormant. He knew what my little lie was, and he got a little too powerful. He became a risk, the professor lamented with a frown. That doesn't look like a performance. You're actually sad about it, E.G. said. You had to nip it in the bud, you see. I've done it countless times, with Leon, of course, but also with Koski here. E.G. was always too busy with his own problems to think about judging anyone else. Actually, I'm going to break this last quote apart since it's a page break. So I love how it begins. The confirmation that E.G. and Logomon, despite that program holding him down, something is going to occur. Their indistinguishable magic flame burned bright once more. And we also get to discover more about the professor, the way that essentially he's saying that he's had experience betraying people. He has experience of letting people go once he has no use of them. And I find the fact that Leon was aware very interesting. I really now want to reread the beginning parts of the story and see and pick up on those details. Maybe I just missed it. And if I did miss it, I could see why it's my first time reading it. And I was just excited for Digimon in such a cool new format, this light novel format. Hell yeah. I'm still a fan of that. Anyways, but yeah, I'm really curious about that, and I'm looking forward to keeping an eye out for that textual evidence. So, E.G. and Logomon's agency determination, the reaffirmation that the professor is a individual who uses people. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue. And also, again, the fact that he does look sad, that doesn't look like a performance. You're actually sad about it. It's just unfortunate because essentially for me what that line says is that the professor can have real relationships if he actually did care about the people, but unfortunately he can't just care about them. He has to care about what he could get from them, and that takes precedence for him. Thus, why he has to look sad, because he has to get rid of them. If he was just any other individual like E.G., Yulin, Koski, Satsuki, he wouldn't have to look sad because he'll be working as a community member. He'll be working as a team. But again, since he's a selfish individual, that's why he has to be sad about it, because he has to nip it in the bud. He has to do something. And it's just unfortunate. But continuing forward, E.G. was always too busy with his own problems to think about judging anyone else. He and Logomon caught out to one another over the connection and reaffirmed their desire to save their friends. They were a team, and there was but one path in front of them. Their hearts became one, and Logomon burst free of the restraint to him. Bits of chain flew through the air as Professor Ryuzenji spun around, eyes wide with shock. How did you break the restraint so quickly? I got hellfire in my veins. The moment my body feels any sort of foreign object, I can generate enough heat to burn through it, Logomon said, head held high. The fur once again stood on end as a flaming aurora enveloped their body. Now listen here, mad scientist. You don't get to use people however you want, Logomon let out a howl. They were determined to protect their pack from this enemy. Mad scientist, goodness that hurts, Logomon. You sure do know how to push my buttons. Eh? Looks like I've gone and given myself another to do before finishing the decryption. You just have to wait a little longer, Rio buddy, Professor Rosenji said as he paused the vaccine sector decryption. This isn't going to end well for you, Ichi said as he readied the Digimon Linker Hellfire bobbing and flickering on its screen. And that's where part 9 ends. I won't lie, I'm really curious to see where part 10 goes. I'm loving the action that's popping up, bubbling up. I feel like the story delivered itself to this point in a natural, organic kind of way that it's deserved. This moment of action, this moment of positive violence because Logomon, as he says, he's going to protect his pack, protect his friends in connection with Iji. So again, although I wasn't happy about the professor becoming the villain, I am enjoying what the writers what they're doing with him as a villain. They're totally making him someone that we want to root against. And I'm curious. I'm really hopeful. I'm happy that Iji and Logomon are getting their spirits back, their fire, their energy. But I'm hopeful that Yolene will also be helping out as well. Not just Yolene, but also Kosuke. I still feel bad for Kosuke. Definitely, out of the 3 characters, Kosuke is definitely at his lowest point right now, unfortunately. But I hope he'll get a second win and realize that the route forward is not to lament, but rather to work together with his friends, Yolene, and his team, the Sons of Chaos, Iji, and move forward from there. My question for everyone is just, it's going to be a simple one. Did you finish reading Digimon Seekers? If you have, what did you think of it? Are you looking forward to the epilogue? I did see some commentary from the community. Some people apparently they're saying typical Digimon, it has to end the way that it does. So I am curious about that. I personally did enjoy how Tri ended. Also Last Kuzuna. I also did enjoy Savers and how that ended, and Adventure 2 as well. So I'm hoping that my opinion will be not as I don't want to say negative because there's definitely valid criticism to be had, especially if it is bad. But I'm hoping that my opinion will offer a different perspective. There you go. Hopefully my opinion of the ending will offer a different perspective. I'm really looking forward to the epilogue as well. And I'm probably going to read part 10 after I finish with this video. As I said at the beginning, I haven't read 10, 11, or 12 yet. I want to keep it kind of like that, the way that they were doing it in the past, the way they were doing it just before last week, one part a week. I really don't know why or understand why Bandai Namco decided to release everything at once. When I logged into my YouTube and I saw Digimon Seekers 412, I was like, what? What's going on here? Did I miss something? So again, to reiterate, my question for everyone is, actually, I'll have 2 questions. My question for everyone is, did you finish reading Digimon Seekers? And also, how do you feel about Eiji and Logomon for this specific part? I am loving it. I'm loving how they're getting their agency. I love how Logomon, at the beginning of the story, he seemed more like the professor, like someone who was more concerned about themselves. But as the story progressed and as he developed his relationships, we're seeing that Logomon, as he states right here, he's very pack-oriented. He's very community-focused. And once you've become a friend of Logomon, he'll do his best to protect you. I love how he housed. I love the statements that he was making towards the professor, and I'm looking forward to what Eiji and Logomon will do in the next part. Thank you so much for watching / listening, everyone. I do appreciate it. I guess pardon my hair. If one couldn't tell, my hair was wet at the beginning of the video, and obviously it dried up throughout the video. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video, brush my hair, and then read Digimon Seekers Part 10. Again, thank you so much. Have a prodigious day. I'll see everyone next week, and have a great day.